Okay, so um, so the book of Jephthah. Oh, so first of all, David, um, 2 weeks ago we talked about. You mentioned, I don't know why it came up, but Moses being referred to as the greatest judge, the greatest
Right.
of the prophets. And so I read up on it to see, because obviously it says so, like in Deuteronomy, after his death scene in chapter 34, it says, never has such a great prophet materialized for the Jewish people, for the Israelites since Moses. But I was, again, it just struck me as odd because, again, the prophets are recognized by this pattern where they are speaking truth to power, where they're the spiritual voice in the context of a monarchy. And so Miriam is always referred to as the prophetess, and it's understandable because, again, she was the voice, a spiritual voice or critic, compared to Moses, who was the political authority. So I read up on it, and I can't find anything. So, other than the fact that prophets are understood to have a kind of a direct connection to God, and kind of having access to divine truth. But that's true also of King David, or definitely King Solomon, and they're not considered prophets again. So I couldn't explain it when we talked, and now that I've studied it, I still can't explain it. So that's that. Now, before we get to Jephthah, let me comment on the name. So how do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce
Jephthah.
it? Okay, just like I did. So usually the English name, the anglicization of a biblical name sounds something like the Hebrew name, but here it sounds completely different. Okay? The Hebrew name is Yifftah. And basically the problem is that these names were transliterated from Hebrew to Greek and Latin, and then to modern vernaculars. So, and the problem was that Latin did not have a Y. So basically every name that had a Y was written with an I in classical Latin. Okay? And that's why, for example, on the cross you see Jesus with an I, Jesus Nazarene. So Iftach was written in Latin as Iepta. With an I at the beginning. Because basically in classical Latin, the I operated both as a vowel, E, and as a consonant, ye. But later on, the two functions were separated. Okay, so for the consonant, they added a little curl at the bottom, which produced RJ, and for the vowel, they left the I. So the J sounded ya, and the I remained a vowel. So when Jesus was spelled with a J in Latin, the pronunciation was still the same as it was when it was spelled with an I. Okay? Jesus. Okay? In Hebrew, Yeshu, or Yeshua. It's basically Joshua. Okay, so actually Joshua is a good name to see this, because the name in Hebrew is Yehoshua, or in short Yeshua. But again, if you replace the Y with a J, you get Jesu or Jeshu. So so basically every J that you see in biblical names is in fact a Y in Hebrew, because there's no J in Hebrew, and was pronounced as Y in Latin. So for example, how would you pronounce the name Joseph in Hebrew or in Latin?
Joseph.
Yosef, exactly. Okay, so it's and so by the same token, Jephthah is Yifftah. And so, if you don't mind, so usually I just use the anglicized names because that's how we know them, Solomon rather than Shlomo or whatever. But if you don't mind, I'll use Yiftach simply because it breaks my teeth. I can't say a sentence without stumbling on Jephthah. So that's just on the name. Okay, so the story of the story has two climaxes: the war, and then the sacrifice of the daughter. So we'll focus on the first and the second. So I asked you if the author portrays Iftach positively or negatively. Is the author trying to make you think well of him or ill of him? Okay, so just what's your impression, or what was your impression as you read? Both of you. Did you? Well, what was your impression of him? Positive or negative?
It seems like it seems positive insofar as he's singled out by the biblical God, and then as opposed to all these other folks who could have stepped up, and that he is willing to.
But let me correct you. He wasn't singled out by God. He's the only judge who's not picked by God. Like all the others really are. It says, that God singled out, or God elevated, or God chose to spoke to Gideon. With him, God isn't involved in the choice at all. It's only the elders who pick him. Later on, after they pick him, and he prays to God, and he makes a vow, then God kind of aids in the battle. But he doesn't. But he's the only one who's not picked by God. So if you liked him because God picked him,
Yeah, then it seems like that point would go to the opposite then. So disfavor.
so you're God-centric in terms of your sympathies.
In that juxtaposition, yes.
Okay, but again, just as you read, did you have just in terms of character construction? Did you?
The sacrifice at the end, he doesn't. To me, he doesn't come off very good.
Yeah, sacrificing the daughter.
Right, and that he kind of was brash and like promising whatever comes out of my tent first, and without thinking it through, just to get this single battle or just to deliver this enemy into his game.
So wait, Tal, were you going to say?
I was just going to say that in the beginning of the chapter, they describe him pretty meticulously as a very noble warrior. So I started out reading it as a positive.
Right. And until what David said, until he makes the promise, or until he actually.
Yeah. Until you understand that his I guess morals are not, because I don't know if his morals, don't have the word, sulam arachim,
value system.
Yeah, that his value system is a bit off, because
or his moral judgment or something. Yeah. But look, you're both saying that until the sacrifice, until the human sacrifice, or maybe until the rash vow, maybe I'll add the war against Ephraim. That he conducts the war against the Ammonites. The Ammonites? Yeah, the Ammonites. It is the Ammonites, right?
Ammonites also close to Yep.
Yeah. But then after his harsh war against the tribe of Ephraim, maybe that already kind of it portrays him all of a sudden as it takes a negative turn, and then certainly with the daughter's sacrifice. But until then, both we were saying that the knock against him comes late in the story, against his character. Okay? Up until then, he's a sympathetic character, and kind of an impressive guy, again, until you start getting new data on him.
Yeah, they describe him coming from a low no words today.
Low status.
lower class, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of becoming a good warrior, and you read through that, and it makes you feel like you're voting for the underdog,
Right. Yeah. So look,
sort of
the
that
author,
up there.
the so look, we'll evaluate. So again, we're doing the first peak first, the war, and then the second peak, the sacrifice later. But so we'll deal with the human sacrifice in a bit. And right now, it seems like a certain portrayal of this character, which is completely negated by the second part of the story. And so, right now, there's this dissonance. You know, the first and the second part clash, and so we might find that actually there might be more continuity, that they might fit. But certainly until that point, it seems that the author wants us to like him. Okay, like you said, that he's an underdog from birth. He's treated harshly by his family and by his tribe. His people vomit him out without a penny of inheritance, which is due. But nevertheless, he makes something of himself in the hills. We know that he's not a hothead, even though he's a bandit, leading a bunch of kind of rough men. We know that he's not a hothead or a thug, because in the negotiations with the tribal elders, he's very calm and shrewd. And then the same thing with the Ammonite king. Okay? He's not this kind of rough, again, this violent man. And we know that he's godly. Okay? He knows Jewish history, that history lesson he gives the Ammonite king, and his dealings with the priesthood, etc. And even though he tries to avert war by making the Israelite case to the Ammonite king, he's not a peacenik. Okay? He prepared his army for war while negotiating, while the negotiation was ongoing. Okay? So that when it failed, he was ready to strike and win. Okay? So there are all these elements that the author places there for us to make us connect with him and root for him and like him. And if you notice, compared to the previous judges, Yifftah stands out in the fact that he's an outcast, or that he's an outsider. A very sharp contrast, for example, with Gideon, who came from a good, large, and strong family. A family that he could take to war on his own, without requiring others. And his family supported him politically and militarily. Iftach is on the other end of the spectrum, which explains why Iftach wasn't eager. He didn't put himself forth. He didn't volunteer to save his people, as we saw with Ehud, with Deborah, and with Gideon. Okay? And God doesn't choose him as a vehicle to save the Israelites. Okay? Instead, he's hired by the tribesmen, by the tribe elders, because he's known as a tough guy, because he's known as a warrior. Okay? And the question about his motivation, again, his character comes in here. You'll notice that they don't offer him money. Okay? They offer him leadership. And not just allowing him to rejoin the tribe that had rejected him in disgrace, but bringing him back in to an elevated position, okay, above the tribal elders. Okay, that's what they're offering him. And if you look at chapter 11, verse 6 to 11, that's the negotiation. Chapter 11, 6 to 11. You can see, again, we don't need to read it, but you'll notice that there's this back and forth. It's an active haggling. Okay? They offer to make him their captain, okay, a military commander. Okay? It says an officer, Katzin. But he shrewdly negotiates the for a higher post of leader or head, basically a chieftain, okay, what we would call a judge. Okay? And indeed, we see afterwards, at the end of the story, or later in the story, in chapter 12, verse 7. Yeah. 7? Where is it? Yeah, it says that he was a judge, that he was regarded as a judge. Okay, so it was officer, head, and we see that his position was that of a judge, just like the other judges, who retains political leadership even after the war. Okay, so when you see this negotiation where this guy is not interested in saving his people, and then even when they turn to him for help, he's not eager to, he's not jumping at the opportunity. It's not something that he necessarily wants to do particularly. So why does he take the offer? Okay, why doesn't he tell him to stuff it after what they've done to him? And again, instead, why does he choose to return to this tribe that despised and humiliated him and dispossessed him and chased him away, etc.?
It does say in verse 3 that after he was exiled, that men of low character, this is my English translation, men of low character gathered about him.
Chapter 10?
No, it's chapter 11, at the end of verse 3.
Okay.
He fled from his brothers and settled in Tob country. Men of low character gathered about him.
Right.
And went out raiding with him. So he wasn't around, and he had a wife and sons. So he wasn't around.
No, he didn't. He didn't have sons.
And the wife's sons grew. No.
That's his father. In verse 2 is his father. So he had a number of sons, including Yifftah.
Okay, gotcha. But anyways, yeah, he wasn't around. The narrator goes out of his way to say that he became like a pirate.
Right. No. So we understand why he doesn't feel connected to the tribe and doesn't volunteer to, hey, I'll save you. And when they come to him for help, he says he doesn't. We can understand that he's not motivated by civic spirit. Okay, I'm a member of this tribe. I'm connected. He doesn't feel connected, and rightly, and we understand why. Okay, so we know that he accepts their offer, not because of money, because they don't offer him money, and not because of civic spirit, because he shows no sign of caring that this tribe is harassed and oppressed by the Ammonites. And he says, look, he's happy to walk away if he doesn't get the higher office, the political office, because they offer him military leadership, and he's willing to walk away and not do it unless they offer him the higher, again, in that negotiation from, 6 to 11. Okay, so it's not civic spirit. Okay, so why does he accept their offer? Why do this? Or why would he? I mean, obviously the text doesn't say explicitly. But why would he? Like if you take away civic spirit, if you take away money, why would somebody accept this job?
It would have to be, he saw it was in his self-interest.
Right. Yeah, so he's not doing it for them,
no.
So he's doing it for himself, okay?
Right.
But it's not money, so what is it? What does he gain?
Security, if he becomes their leader and they're strong, I suppose.
Security compared to what? I mean, he's a leader of a pretty successful desert band. Like it doesn't sound like he's.
I would go for prestige.
So.
I would go for prestige.
Okay. So look, that's certainly a possibility. Okay, but it doesn't seem, again, from the negotiation, it doesn't seem that he is.
Why? It does. It does, because he says here, says here, why did you come to me when you're in need?
Right.
And they said, now that you came back, you fought and you were successful, and now you can be the head for us, that you can lead us.
Right.
And he says, I mean, it sounds like it's prestige. I mean, he just
Yeah.
he wants the higher ranking job.
It
Gives him.
yeah. Except that it doesn't sound like he wants to earn their respect. The respect of the people who scorned him, because he's throwing it back in their faces. Why do you come to me? Okay, so and he's willing to leave them hanging. So you see, in 9, he says, you've come to me to bring me back to fight for you, and God and God will deliver them to me if I become your head, meaning the political leader, the judge. Okay, but he's willing to leave them if they don't do that. Okay, so he doesn't, like, if he wanted their respect and their acceptance, you want me here, I'll save you. You thought I was useless, but here, I'll save you. I'll do the service for you. Okay, so I can get back in your high esteem or something like that. Okay, but he's not doing it for that, and we know that he's not doing it in terms of, again, military. He's not doing it. He's not seeking military glory. It doesn't say that here, but when he gathers his army, when he prepares his army, and then conduct that very long and kind of tedious back and forth, that history lesson that he gives the king of Ammon, we can see that he's, as the leader, as the military leader, as the military commander, he's doing his darndest to avert a war. Okay, so I mean, usually we know from any history that the way for a military commander to gain glory and status is by victory. And we see him here, again, he's willing to solve this problem without war, based on the negotiation. Okay, so look, so the question is, again, why does he want this military office? He's a very successful man on his own, outside the tribe, with his gang, as the elders themselves say, you've done very well for yourself. Okay, so if it's not military reputation, if it's not civic spirit, if it's not a desire for their acceptance and respect, then we're getting back to David's point. He's doing it for self-interest. He's doing it for himself. Okay, but what exactly does he get out of it? Not money, not reputation, not acceptance. We don't hear after his victories. We don't hear from the author that Yifftah reveled in wielding political power like we were told about Gideon, who builds this kind of temple for himself, and he wields power like a king, and taxes and everything else. Okay, so he's taking this real danger, going to war against this very powerful enemy, for himself, we can assume, but it's unclear what it is he's getting. Okay, so going back to Tal's point, if he doesn't benefit, if we get the sense that he doesn't care about their good opinion, where do you see a benefit to Iftach, or where do you imagine a benefit?
For his family, maybe.
Pardon?
For his family, so they can integrate well in the tribe, and they can sort of have everything he didn't have as a boy.
Read in chapter 11. What is it? This is after the vow. Okay, so you read the whole story, everything we've done, and the war and everything else, and then in verse 30, he makes that vow to God, that he'll sacrifice anything that comes out of his house. And then verse 34, all of a sudden you find out that, hey, this guy has a family. Okay? We didn't know anything about it. We didn't know he had a daughter. Okay, so all of a sudden, very late in the story, you find out, to Tal's point, he has a daughter. And just so you won't be, just to clarify to you, the author clarifies, she is the only thing he has. Okay, it says, and she was his only child. Beside her, he had neither son nor daughter. Okay, and then the text makes a point of telling you that she's of marriage age, but not married. Okay, because it says later on that she's a virgin. Okay, and then when she goes to bemoan her virginity. Okay, so obviously when we make an observation about a woman's virginity, it means that she's of marriage age. Okay, you don't say it about a 5-year-old girl. Okay, for obvious reasons. Okay, so the text tells us all of a sudden, late in the story, he's got a daughter, his only child. She's unmarried, meaning he doesn't have a line from her. Okay, and by the way, so to Tal's point, why wouldn't she be married?
Possibly because of their status in society.
Right. Look, her father is the son of a whore.
He's not a good catch.
Yeah, it's a terrible, bad lineage. Again, this girl's grandmother is a whore, was a whore. Her father is an outlaw bandit. He's an outcast. He has no family. He has no tribe. Okay, so what family in the tribe of Menashe or in another tribe, what family would want to make a marriage alliance with this girl's father? Okay, again, marriages, think of Bedouin society or traditional societies. Marriages bring kind of our alliances between families. Okay? Her father brings nothing to the marriage. Again, he has no family, he has no land, no herds, no respectability. Okay, so this woman, we need to have this explained to us because we are modern people and our understanding of marriage is very individualistic or individualist. Okay? But people in these kinds of societies, when they read about Yifftah, the way we did, they understand that, okay, this is an outsider to society. He's not, nobody would want him, or nobody would want his offspring. He's a very bad catch, to Tal's point. Okay, so this woman is unmarried because nobody would have her, because of her father's low and shameful status. Okay. So we don't see evidence that Iftach is eager to rehabilitate his status in his tribe for his own purposes. Okay? He doesn't seem to crave military glory. He doesn't seem to crave the affection of the people who had chased him away. He doesn't seem to crave wealth or power like Gideon did. Okay? But he has a daughter that we know he cares deeply about. Tearing his clothes and crying and everything else. Okay, so he can save his daughter. He can save her from a life of barrenness, of being a spinster, a life of shame, a life of loneliness. Okay, so becoming a judge will give her, again, if we're saying that he's doing it for himself, but we can't find what it is he's getting that he wants. There's this part of him, this daughter, that he can save her, and that by becoming a judge, he can give her the chance to find a husband from a decent family and to become part of that respectable family that she'd be married into, and to have kids of her own. Okay, because again, she's an unmarried grown woman. or at least of marriage age, whatever was considered marriage age at that time. Okay. So since we're on this topic, I need to just take a quick detour to explain something about the status of women in the Bible. In fact, not just in the Bible, but virtually in all pre-modern societies. So in the ancient world, in the ancient Near East, unless you lived in the large superpowers, okay, in Egypt and in Mesopotamia, populations grew very, very slowly. Okay, so the natural growth rate was either slightly above zero or slightly below zero. Okay, just slightly above replacement or slightly below replacement. And this is because death tolls were very high, especially infant and child mortality, but also, so just because of biological or medical reasons, people just died in large numbers, but also because families lived at or below subsistence levels, economically speaking. Okay, so not beyond the medical issues, just economic issues. Okay, people lived malnourished, and people died malnourished. It was kind of a reality of life, again, unless you lived in Egypt or Mesopotamia. And this was a situation in normal times. Add to this wars, add to it droughts, add floods, etc. Okay, so it's a very harsh reality of life in most of the world. So resources were thin, and starvation was a reality of life, really just one bad crop away from starvation. So in these societies, the more boys you produce, the more male children you produce, the larger your family can be, or your clan can be. Because more men in the family means more workers in the field, more soldiers to protect the family and its land and its flocks and its interests. Okay, so the sons are the ticket to the family's growth and economic security and physical security. Okay. And we know that daughters were valued a lot less. So, but why weren't daughters the ticket to growth? I mean, after all, women produce children. That's growth. That's essential for growth. So why weren't girls, daughters, regarded as essential for this kind of success, familial success?
Suppose one alternative would be if we take out monogamy, I guess the males could sire a lot more children.
Yeah, but still, you would think that women are, if the idea is to sire children, women are essential. Okay, so it seems like daughters would be as valuable. You can't. It's a package deal. To produce children, you have to have a man and a woman. So why aren't? And we know this not just from those societies, but from traditional societies today. Girls are not seen as a ticket for the family to grow in numbers, economically, etc. Why is that?
The other alternative to accumulate wealth, I suppose, if you accumulate wealth by the sword, then you need more swords. Or if you defend wealth by the sword, you need more swords.
Yeah, that's true. But again, but you want to grow. You want to produce grandchildren and great-grandchildren, etc. And for that, you have to have daughters, or you have to have women. Look, you have to think like a Bedouin. Think like a clansman, not as a KKK, but a member of a clan. What happens to the boy? What happens to your sons? Look, in our families, as soon as they hit 18 or 22 or 24, I guess these days 34, but eventually they leave. You kick them out of the house. Okay, what happens in a Bedouin tribe?
So the women or the the men stick with their tribes or the women leave their tribes.
Exactly. Okay. The married girl. So when you have a daughter, again, if she's successful, if she's marriageable, she will get married to a man from a different family, a different clan. She will join her husband's family. Okay, so she is going to live with his family, and whatever labor and social services she provides, she will provide for his family. And whatever children she produces, she will add to his family, not to yours. Okay, so look, women are very important. Okay, but wives are very important to the family, because wives are the ticket to a family's growth and economic growth and security, etc. Because they produce sons for the family. The wife does. Okay, the sons, as you say, sons become workers. They become soldiers. They bring wives into the family, into this family. By contrast, daughters will leave this family for somebody else's family, at which point they will no longer provide any labor or social services to our family. So already they're unproductive. Okay, they're not going to, the production they offer, which is primarily children, is not going to be to this family, it's going to be to somebody else's family. Whereas the sons, their product, which is muscle in the field and muscle on the battlefield, will be provided for this family. Okay? So already the daughters are not productive for us. But not only are they not productive.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
But in marriage, don't you get extra protection, or by the marriage, by having two families unite by marriage, you get,
it's a
some
closer
sort of a deal about protection, and
it's a closer.
so you do get something out of it. Your family does get something out of it.
Yeah. It's a closer relationship. Okay, it's a closer relationship, but it's not like your own family. It's not blood. Okay, so you're right. It's kind of like a diplomatic.
Yeah, but if you are in war, they can come and help. So you do get extra muscles by the marriage.
It's true.
No?
Theoretically, yes. But look, the United States and Latvia are allies. Okay, they're both members of this alliance, or Lithuania, or some other, one of these countries, members of NATO. Does anyone think that if Lithuania is attacked by Poland or Russia, that the U.S. is going to go to war? I mean, the U.S. will offer some assistance, certainly, but they're not going to go to war unless it's in the U.S.'s interest at the time, for whatever reason. Okay, so the same is true here. It means these married families are now more in each other's orbit. They're the first go-to in terms of commerce, in terms of if you need a loan, if you need military support, if you need somebody to talk to somebody, so you can use your father-in-law to kind of drop a word in somebody's ear that he's connected to. But it's not a guarantee for muscle in the field. The only guarantee for muscle in the field is your tribe, where it's like, military discipline. Okay, it's an essential obligation, which it is not in these familial alliances. So the daughter already won't produce the social services like the sons for this family. But on top of not being productive in the future, they are counterproductive in the present, because until the daughter leaves to marry into somebody else's family, I have to feed her and clothe her and nurse her for 12 or 14 or 15 years, which was the marriage age in the ancient world. Okay, so I invest so much in her. I invest money and resources in the sons and the daughters. But I'm getting something back from the sons and I'm getting nothing back from the daughters, theoretically. And again, this is not just in the ancient Near East. Look at, again, traditional societies today in North Africa, the Middle East, China. Given their restriction, the political restrictions on the size of families, they need to choose. Chinese families needed to choose between keeping the sons or keeping the daughters. Okay, and we know that ever since China adopted this policy, the one-child policy, they've conducted these massive sex-specific abortions, where they test for the sex of the fetus, and if it's a daughter, it's aborted so that it can have a son. Okay? So given that resources were so thin and families lived at the edge of starvation, how could a family justify raising daughters? Okay? Why not kill the daughter as soon as she's born, instead of, again, feeding her and clothing her and sheltering her and everything else? What's the incentive for the father or for the family to keep the daughter alive once she's born?
She is a way to ally with other tribes.
Right, but again, it's look, the alliance is a promise. You know that in the future, if you have a problem, you can trust, you can rely on my help. But again, these are, their alliances are just like our alliances.
Well, thinking a little bit ahead from today, or in Judges, like when the tribe of Benjamin lose all of their women and children, they need wives, also because the other tribes won't marry. But like within a tribe, if it's big enough, can't they still marry within their tribe?
Oh yeah, definitely. They're married within the tribe all the time, but just across families.
Right. So
Right.
okay. So, but wouldn't that isn't the tribe's strength through generating wives within the tribe?
Oh yeah,
make
no,
the family
like
more secure.
definitely. Look, wives are essential. You have to have wives. Okay, because if you don't have wives, you don't have boys, and you need the boys to work in the field and protect the family and its land and its asset, etc. Okay, so wives are very important. The problem is those 15 years that I have to feed the daughter, and then I don't get to enjoy what she produces. You will get to enjoy her. You will get the sons. I won't. Okay, so how do these traditional societies, and you read about it all the time in the Bible too, you already saw it, you just don't think of it. How does the Bible, or how do traditional societies today make it worthwhile for the father, for the families, for the head of the family? How do they prevent him from killing the daughter as soon as she's born? Because again, we, the tribe, or the nation, we want your daughter so that she could be a wife. How do I make it worth your while to keep her and feed her and clothe her and shelter her for 15 years? Tal, you know this because you live in Israel and you know how Bedouins and Arabs conduct their business. And you've both read about it.
She can serve while she's. She can be free labor.
No, but no, in order to what happens before the father agrees to marry his daughter to somebody in a traditional society?
Is there a money exchange?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I will pay you.
Then
And it's not a dowry; it's like the reverse of a dowry.
It's called a
It's
bride,
like
a bride price. Okay, so the groom pays the father the price of the bride. Okay, so basically, when the daughter comes of age and gets married, or before she gets married, the groom's family compensates the father for the cost of raising her and feeding her and nursing her and protecting her for all these years. So the logic of it is, again, we see a bride price today as this kind of a form of slavery, that the father owns her and he's selling her like a cow. That is not how they see it. And that's not how they saw it here, okay, when they have these arrangements. Okay? The groom is, like I said, wives are very important, right? Wives are essential. Okay? And the groom is able to marry his wife today as a virgin, by the way, because her father had paid for 12 or 15 years to feed and clothe her and protect her from attackers and rapists. Okay, so to get the bride, the groom has to pay the father for what the father had invested all these years in this young wife, who will now start producing for the groom's family. Again, producing labor and social services and children. Okay, so basically, without the bride price, the father would kill the daughter, because if there wasn't this social convention that somebody will pay me for a marriageable daughter, then I'm just feeding this. Like if they had family arrangements like we have in our more modern society, where the groom doesn't pay for the wife, then the father has this calculation. Okay, so I'm going to, again, think of a subsistence economy where everybody's almost starving. So I'm going to keep this girl alive and fed and healthy and protected and everything else for 15 years, taking food out of my mouth, out of my son's mouth, out of my wife's mouths, and then I'm just going to give her to somebody else to produce for him. Why did I rob myself of food and my sons of food? Okay? This convention of a bride price makes it worth my while to keep her around and to feed her and protect her, etc. Okay, so it's kind of woven into traditional societies, this bride price. Okay, so we see it as a form of slavery. They see it as a kind of a feature of a subsistence economy. However, this does mean that a father must marry his daughter in order to recoup his losses. And of course, the more attractive she is, the more likely he is to recoup everything that he's invested in her. And by contrast, the more damaged she is, the more difficult it would be for the father to recoup. Okay, if she has a deformity, if she has a physical or mental problem, if she's not a virgin. Okay. So again, this is from the perspective of the father. Okay, what the importance of a marriage arrangement for the father. Well, for the daughter by surviving infancy. The promise that her father will get money means that she gets to survive infancy and grow. And then for the father, we just said. But for the daughter too, for the grown daughter, so the father has to marry her off. Okay, to recoup this money. And again, think of very poor people who don't have money to spare or resources to spare. Okay. So financially, the father has to marry her off. But as important, the daughter too has to get married in order to have a full life. Okay, to enjoy the respect and appreciation of her family as someone who contributes to her family rather than being a burden on the family. Okay, so a woman achieves her path towards honor and respectability by joining a family and becoming a contributing member of it, by providing this new family with labor, social services, and male children. Okay, it's a way for her to gain respectability, but also, again, moving back to the economic front, marrying and producing sons is also her security against old age. Okay, because, do you understand why? The social security aspect of having sons for a woman? Do you see why that would be?
they'll be able to take her to make sure she's okay.
Right.
But I'm assuming, I guess, we're kind of abstracting from familial attachments here and talking about it in kind of more economic terms. I'm trying to figure that part out.
Yeah. So look, again, think of Bedouins. Okay. In a family living at the edge of subsistence, again, resources are thin, which means that the biggest and first portions of food or whatever reason, medicine, go to the more productive members of the family, the ones who raise the crops and the livestock, the ones who protect the family and its property. Okay, so of course, old people are taken care of out of respect and moral obligation, but it's their children who take care of them. Okay? So if you did not produce sons, who will take care of you when you are no longer productive? When you're old, aged, etc., sick? Okay, who will take care of you? Who will advocate for you? Who will take food from his own plate and give it to you? Now certainly, aunts and, the men in the family, the men in the clan, will undoubtedly provide some care for their aunts and uncles and their second cousin once removed. But they're not under obligation to do so as they are in caring for their own father and mother. Okay, if I'm going to, so I as the father, first I feed my children, my wife and children, then my father and mother, then the various other, again, my spinster aunt and the uncle who is, has a disability or whatever else. But they come fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh on the list. Okay? And I emphasize that the men do this. Do you understand why I specify that the sons are the ones who are going to take care of their father and mother in old age? I mean, why can't the daughters provide this senior care?
Well, I suppose Ruth is an example of that kind of happening, but she's Ruth takes care of her mother-in-law. But that kind of shows why, it's very, very, very difficult for Ruth to do that, because she doesn't have control of any finances. She has to go.
Well, but also, look, Ruth made this weird decision of sticking with her mother-in-law, okay? But it points out that, look, the reason why daughters are not a Social Security system for an aging parent is that the daughter is gone. By the time the mother is an old lady, her daughter is already gone. She's married. Okay? A married daughter is part of somebody else's family. Okay? She lives in somebody else's house or tent or wherever. She lives 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days travel away. Okay? She's in no position, even if she loves her mother, she's in no position to take food from her own plate and give it to her mother. She's miles and miles away. And the same thing if someone needs to advocate for this old lady for medicine or for who knows what. The daughters are not there, the married daughters. The only ones who are there are sons and unmarriageable daughters. Okay, so now that we understand the kind of the social structure of the position of women in these families, now we can discuss Yiftach's daughter. Okay, so Yiftach's daughter, as you pointed out, Tal, she's damaged goods because of who and what her father is and his lineage. Okay. So the only conceivable reason Iftach makes this career change, because again, we saw that he's not eager to do it for them, and all the selfish reasons that we can think of, again, money, status, military glory, acceptance, we don't see him being interested in it. Um, what does make sense then is that he's making this career change to make this unmarriageable daughter into marriage material. Okay? To give her a chance of joining a good family and having a family of her own, which means for her respectability, honor, protection, and security into her old age, which is something that he can't provide because, he'll be dead by the time she's old. Okay, and this brings us to this sacrifice scene is, in verses 30 and 31, when he makes the vow, it's such a tragic scene because of this, because him becoming a judge, him becoming respectable, becoming a leader in the tribe, transforms her prospects. Okay, he can save her. He can transform her into marriage material. Okay, which is why this vow is so tragic, and why it's so tragic seeing her when he comes home, seeing her come out to him with the dance moves and the tambourines. Okay, if you look at verse 34. Okay, he comes out and there's his daughter. Okay, and only then we discover that he even had a daughter. Okay. So so that's the kind of the tragic, or that's the context that makes this scene so tragic. Okay. Now, the big question for 2,000 years, 3,000, among commentators is whether he sacrificed the daughter or not. And so I asked you to consider, based on what you can see here, whether he slaughtered and sacrificed his daughter to God. So, what do you think?
I took it that my understanding was that he did. We don't really hear from her afterwards, and his reaction makes it sound like he does. Like that's what is expected, and we don't hear anything otherwise.
Right. Okay. So, well, it not only his reaction, but it says, verse
she went up
39. Okay, so after she goes with her girlfriends to weep to mourn her virginity in the mountains, and then after 2 months she comes back to her father, and he performed his vow to her as he vowed it. Do you see? Verse 39. You see, Tom? Okay. Okay. So the text of the vow in wherever it was, 31, the text plainly says, okay, so if you're answering yes, he sacrificed her, the evidence for it is that the text of the vow promises that whoever comes from my front door to greet me, I will sacrifice to God as a burnt offering. Okay. Now, by the way, sometimes the way out, the text is translated as into English as whatever. Okay, so whatever can cover both a human being and something and a dog or a cat or a donkey. Okay, and so some commentators say, well, he meant to sacrifice an animal, and then this person came out instead. I guess the Hebrew is unclear. The Hebrew word or the Hebrew formulation of the vow can mean either whatever or whoever. But let's be serious here. Are we to believe that he?
No, but it says vayasla et nidro, which means he
No,
did
yeah,
it
no,
to
no,
her.
no. Yeah, no. That's after he
It's
he,
not.
he does it. But I mean in verse 31, 32. So there are those who say that he didn't sacrifice her, or that he didn't mean to, because his vow he meant whatever, not whoever. Okay, that he meant to sacrifice a cow. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. It strains credulity that he thought that a cow or a goat could come out of his house to greet him. Okay, the only non-human thing that will come out to greet you is a dog, because he has this kind of affection. But your cow isn't coming out of your front door, wagging her tail to greet you. Okay, so it's clear. Yeah, this way out doesn't seem to me to work. It's clear that he meant a person. Okay, so again,
But that's also weird because it says. That's also weird because it says here that he doesn't have anyone else other than her. So who would he expect to come out of his
he doesn't have anyone other than her
house if it wasn't for her?
In terms of sons and daughters, or grandchildren or whatever else.
Okay. So
but
maybe
he has
so
people
his
in the
wife
house.
would be okay.
Well, a servant, a laborer. Okay, so he has other people in the house. Okay, so whoever. So look, it's clear that he meant a person. Okay, so it's up to us later on to understand what he meant by this. Okay, but for those who are saying yes, he sacrificed her, you have the vow, the language of the vow in which he says, whoever will come and greet me, that's a person. And then in 39, it says he did to her as he promised. Okay, so the text indicates he promised to do X, and then he did it. And that reads to us, when you read the vow, like human sacrifice. Okay, and the other evidence in favor of yes is what David said. If it's not human sacrifice, if he wasn't about to kill her, then why did he tear his clothes? And why did he, oh my God, what have you done to me? And why did she go to the hills to mourn her virginity? And why was there a national holiday? You didn't mention this, but there's a national holiday. Where is it? Verse 40. Okay, from that day on, there's a national holiday in which Israel's women folk commemorate her memory. Okay, so for those, like I said, there's a long controversy among, or not controversy, debate among commentators. Did he or didn't he? Is there human sacrifice in the Hebrew Bible, or is there not? I mean, obviously there is among Canaanites and other hellish people, but among our people. So, in favor of the yes, this is the evidence that the text offers. Okay, pretty good evidence. How about for those who argue that there wasn't human sacrifice? What's the evidence that they would draw on? I'm one of them, by the way.
It would have to be, well, what comes to mind is that distinction you just pointed out, that the Canaanites and all these people who are the only other time that it stands in contrast to the binding of Isaac, like that God prevented the child sacrifice. And again, that was a distinction. The Canaanites sacrificed their children, not the Israelites.
Yeah, but look, it might be, look, the story often is taken by those who see human sacrifice here as a condemnation of Yifftah. Okay? It just shows what a terrible person he is. That he would have, as Tal said, such a bad value system that he could think that God would want human sacrifice. Okay, so it's a condemnation of him. But what you just said now is a condemnation of what a crappy leader he is, or what a crappy person. Okay, and it's part of this understanding of the book of Judges as this downward slope, that we had great judges early on, mediocre judges in the middle, a bad judge, kind of a degenerate judge in Yifftah, and then the worst judge in the history of judges in Samson. Okay, so it's part of this. What you said is that, look, is correct, as those who say that it was human sacrifice, that this is a Canaanite, this is barbaric, this is un-Jewish, ungodly, and that's a condemnation of him. But what actual evidence is there in the text to suggest to those who argue against sacrifice? What do they pin their observations on, or their interpretation on?
Could it be in verse 39 at the end, where it says she didn't know any man?
How I agree, but what
I don't know how it's written in English. I don't know what it's
Yeah.
how it's written in English, but in Hebrew, "Hilo yada ish," which means she
Yeah.
stayed single.
She remained single, or she was a
Of the
virgin.
Chok b'Israel.
Yeah. She was virgin. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was virgin.
So so I take from that the punishment he got was that she would never marry, and not that he actually killed her.
Right. So how is it translated in your book?
She had never known a man.
She had never known a man.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So look. So that's a translator's choice. Okay. In Hebrew, it's unclear. Okay. It says he did to her as he vowed, and she did not know a man. Okay. She was a virgin. Okay. But it could be translated, as Tal is translating it, she remained a virgin. And it could be, as your translator translated it, she was a virgin. Okay? She had never known a man until the moment she died, which, of course, unless we're dealing with necrophiliacs, then of course she also didn't know a man. So look, so that's one thing, okay, where you could understand this as something that went into the future. Okay? But also, before we even deal with the stuff that you will find in the text, there's the obvious thing that you don't find in the text of, look, if he killed her, why did it happen off camera? Okay, so look, we know from what it says here that he lived up to his vow. It says he did to her as he vowed. But if living up to the vow meant human sacrifice, why does the Bible not give us the biggest scene in this story? Okay, the hero's homecoming. Okay, this part of the story, when he comes home after the victory, is the heart of the Yifftah story. It's not the victory in battle. Okay, I told you earlier that there are two kind of peaks in this story. One is the victory over the Ammonites, and the other is the daughter's sacrifice. Okay, but you can see that the heart of the story is the second peak. Okay, and you can see it by the fact that the great victory, amazing victory over the Ammonites, is covered in two short verses. Okay, verse 29 and no, sorry, one verse. 29. The whole victory, the whole war is covered. Let me just write this down. One verse. The whole war is covered in one sentence. Okay. So it's clear that for the author, this is a minor issue. You know, the battle is a minor issue. He wants to get to the real bombshell. Because after the victory, we get to hear his daughter came out to greet him. Okay, but it literally says, okay, so he came back home. This is verse 34. And his daughter came out to greet him with dances and tambourines. And oh yes, she had a daughter. He had a daughter. The author is telling us again. He rushes through the victory, so he can get to the real heart of things, the vow, and the fact that the daughter is the one who's going to be subject to the vow. And only then he says, "Oh yes, he had a daughter. Indeed, he had an only daughter, only child. In fact, an unmarried only child." Okay, so now we know he has no child, he has no line, he has no family line. Okay? So the conflict between Yifftah and his vow is what this whole story is about. It's not about the war. Okay, that one verse that we get about the war. The center of the story is this conflict between his vow and his and his welfare, or what he wants. Okay. So, if again, we're now arguing the side of those who are rejecting the idea of human sacrifice, that he sacrificed her. Okay. If this conflict between the vow and Iftach resulted in a father sacrificing his daughter, why don't we see it? I mean, nobody would argue, without being drunk, that the Bible is too bashful. Okay, that the Bible pales in the sight of blood, and you know, it's just too delicate. We've seen much worse in the Bible. Okay. So, if there was, I think a big criticism or a big piece of evidence in favor of those who say no is that if it happened, where is it? Why don't we see it? Okay. What else can you think would critics point to in rejecting the idea that this is human sacrifice?
Why would he send her to the mountains to cry about her virginity if he was about to just
Right.
kill
So,
her and that's it?
Look, she absolutely right. She is mourning her virginity, not her life. Okay, there's something. It's a weird construction. Okay, that the big miss here is not that I'm going to die tomorrow, but that I'm not going to have that I'm going to die without having sex. That's the tragedy of her death. Okay, so it's a kind of a weird thing that kind of it's something to observe. Okay, when we try to understand what was vowed here and what happened here to this girl. Well, you were about to say something, David?
Was it the sex, or was it the children? It reminds me of Lot and his daughters. Lot and his daughters, they didn't have children, and so they got in that whole scene. There seems to be something similar at stake with.
Well, what does the text say? What does the translation say when she goes to bemoan or lament or what does she go into the mountains to do? This is in verse 37. 30. Yeah.
So it says, she further said to her father, "Let this be done for me. Let me be for 2 months, and I will go with my companions and lament upon the hills, and there bewail my maidenhood."
Okay, my maiden. So again, in Hebrew, it's more. Yeah, but again, maidenhood, same thing. Okay, it's the virginity that she and her girlfriends are going to. So you're saying that it's the fact that she doesn't have that it's not the virginity, but the no kids.
Right, just because I don't know, it signals, or to me, it's a similar
trope as the Lot story.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, it's if I mean, I accept it, but again, what she is lamenting is that I will never have kids. I mean, it sounds like, okay, I will never have kids, rather than I'm going to die tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, so we'll stick that to the side for a second. But look, in favor of this understanding of the vow. But we'll get back to it in a second. But another thing that critics, or that people who say there was no human sacrifice here, point to, is that we accept that when Iftach made the vow, he made it about a person. Obviously, okay. The construction that says, whoever or whatever comes out to greet me, the greeting is obviously a person. However, the fact that Iftach was so surprised that his daughter came out clarifies that he did not know it would be his daughter. Okay, so he thought that somebody would come out of his house, and this is why Tal was laughing earlier. That what, if it's somebody else, you can just kill that person? Okay, so if we really think that this vow is about human sacrifice, then we would have to accept that an Israelite of this period could just sacrifice any person that he thought that he wanted to sacrifice. That I can make a vow, whoever I see next, I'm going to sacrifice to God. And then I see my neighbor, I kill him. Or even worse, it's not me killing him. It's me taking him to the temple and the priests killing him and sacrificing him at the altar. Okay? It would clearly, if it were not his daughter, we would clearly see this as murder. Okay? So when he, again, given what we know about Israelite society as portrayed in this Bible, okay, we know that you cannot just go and sacrifice people as you wish. Okay? So when he made the vow, he was not vowing to murder some innocent person coming out of his house to greet him. You cannot do that to your servant, you cannot do that to your slave, you cannot do that to your cleaning lady. We know in the Bible. Okay, so these critics are saying when he vowed to sacrifice a person to God, or to give a person to God, he was promising to do something else. Okay, something that this other person would have to agree to. Okay, because you can't just take your cleaning lady and sacrifice her because you want to say thank you to God. Okay, and also, to the point I mentioned about the priests, okay, the sacrificial laws are laid out pretty explicitly and extensively in the book of Exodus and Leviticus. Okay, only priests are allowed to offer burnt offerings to God at the altar. Okay? So again, are we to believe that people, the Israelites in this period, could just bring other people to the temple, and the priest would take this person, slaughter them at the altar, and sacrifice and burn the body as a burnt offering to God, and that we would never hear about it anywhere else in the Bible? It never happens. Okay, and so we're expected to believe that I can pick somebody at random and have him killed, number one, and that the priests, against Jewish law, would sacrifice him at the altar, and that it would never be mentioned anywhere else in the Bible. And if you just to make it even more incredible that this would be a vow of human sacrifice, remember that only kosher animals can be sacrificed at the altar according to those same laws in the Torah. No unclean animals, and definitely no humans. Humans are not part of the kosher animals. Okay? And we're expected to assume that nobody in Gilad knew this? No priest clarified that it was against the law, against Jewish law? Okay? And even, again, it's just again, more and more ridiculous. Even if the people and the priests were again, let's assume that Iftach really did vow to sacrifice this person who comes out of his door. Okay? Even if we take it, okay, Yiftach was ignorant and debased enough to believe that this is theologically okay. Okay? And okay, let's assume that the people were also as morally and theologically ignorant and debased as Iftach. And the priests also as ignorant of Jewish law and morally debased as Iftach. But surely the biblical author isn't theologically ignorant and morally debased. Okay, so we can accept that Iftach is just a terrible person whose value system is so screwed up and whose understanding of Jewish theology is so terrible that he can think human sacrifice is fine. And the Giladites, also terrible people, the same thing, as ignorant. And the priests, too. The one thing we know is that the biblical author knows Jewish law. Okay? So if this is really if this was human sacrifice, why doesn't the author ever tell us that Iftach committed an abomination? Why doesn't the author clarify to the reader, as he did in the Abraham story, that God hates human sacrifice? Okay, if this is a story of human sacrifice, we would expect the author to tell us that Iftach was a terrible person, that the Giladites were terrible people, that this is an abomination, that this does not reflect on God. God doesn't want this. Okay? So look, all these arguments against this being human sacrifice carry a lot of weight. Okay? The fact that we don't see human sacrifice, the fact that we don't see him sacrificing her, the fact that no priest would perform this unkosher sacrifice, the fact that the Bible doesn't condemn Iftach for committing human sacrifice. Okay? All of these indicate that no human sacrifice took place here. Okay? That the vow did not promise human sacrifice, but promised something else. Okay? And so we have this problem. Okay? On the one hand, we have good evidence that he sacrificed his daughter. And on the other hand, we have good evidence and reasoning that he did not. So if we combine the arguments against human sacrifice with the arguments or the evidence in favor of human sacrifice, what we're left with is that Iftach vowed to do something that was not human sacrifice, but was still painful enough to make him tear his clothes and cry and wail about what I've done to myself. There was a tragic vow. Okay, so it wasn't human sacrifice, but it was something so bad that would make him cry and tear his clothes, and would make her go to the hills with her girlfriends and mourn what was about to happen to her. Okay, so if we combine the two sets of evidence, that's what we have here. And what it means is that we need to go back to the vow to understand what it is that he promised to do. Because clearly, we're misreading it somehow. Okay? The biblical author and the biblical readers understood that this was not human sacrifice. Okay? But we're too far removed from that.
It makes more sense. It makes more sense in the way you explained the taking on the job of being a judge, because the main part of the story has to do with the back and forth of him taking or not taking the job, and it doesn't make that much sense if the whole idea was to marry off his daughter and then he just kills her, makes more sense if the whole idea was to marry her off and then he can't. So he did all this, and then
Right,
at
look.
the end,
Exactly. Look, a father
done.
invests a lot in a daughter, in kids. But the payoff with boys comes about continuously as they become grown men, and they work in the fields, and they shepherd the sheep, and they fight for you for the family and everything else. The payoff for the daughters, for everything you invest in the daughters, comes at the moment of her marriage. Okay? And not just the payoff for you, the father, but the payoff for her. The only way for her to become happy, successful, honorable, and secure towards old age is to get married. Okay? And so it would be tragic for him and for her, not to mention is if somehow she cannot get married. Okay? So we need to, what we need to understand is, we need to understand the vow better, because clearly we're not understanding it the way that if the biblical author thought that this was human sacrifice, he would have probably shown us the sacrifice, but also he would have told us that this was a horrible thing, and that Iftach committed a grave sin, and he doesn't. The author does not tell us this. Okay, so we need to understand the vow as the author understood it. So, in order to do so, if you could skip over to Exodus 13, verse 2. David, if you could read the Exodus is Shmot.
13:2.
13:2.
I'm going to start with 1 because it kind of leads into it.
Okay.
The Lord spoke further to Moses, saying, here's 2, consecrate to me every firstborn, man and beast, and first issue of every womb among the Israelites is mine.
Great. Okay. So God demands to give him the firstborn man and beast. Now go to Exodus 22, verse 28 to 30.
22. You shall not put off the skimming of the first yield of your vats. You shall give me the firstborn among your sons. You shall do the same with your cattle and your flocks. 7 days it shall remain with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me.
Okay. So, does God demand human sacrifice?
Firstborns, but then isn't there like a substitute for the first? Usually
Right.
there's an animal substitute.
Or animal or actual payment. Okay? But clearly, the text says yes. The text says that God says, give me your first son, and the first calf, and the first whatever, puppy. But we know that the answer is no. Okay? And we know this first because the Bible castigates the Canaanites for child sacrifice. And second, we know that even though the Bible says that God demands your first child, we know that there must be some other solution here, that God doesn't actually demand you to kill your first child, because at no page in the Bible do you find an Israelite sacrificing his firstborn son or child to God, because these verses in the book of Exodus seem to command it. Okay, so you can say that. Again, somebody who's insisting on human sacrifice can say, okay, maybe they're disobeying this divine command. Okay, that God demands the firstborn, but the Israelites are disobeying this commandment by God, just like they disobey many other commandments. Look, God outlaws idolatry, and we know that the Israelites committed idolatry all the time. Okay, but again, the biblical author castigates the Israelites repeatedly for violating God's command with regard to idolatry. And nowhere in the Bible does the author castigate the Israelites for disobeying this command to sacrifice your firstborn to me. Okay, so clearly...
You have the story of Abraham that shows you that God is not interested. I mean, the whole story revolves around that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we know
around the horrific nature of what Abraham is about to do, and how God stops him.
And then God says, "I don't want. I abhor human sacrifice." So we know that the Bible abhors it. We know that even though we just read that God says, "Give me your first child, and your first calf, and your firstborn." We understand, as readers, that what we read in Exodus just now is in fact not a command to offer your firstborn son as a human sacrifice to God. Okay? And the solution is what David mentioned. It's what's called Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the son. Okay? And so if you go to Exodus 13, verses 11 to 16.
And when the Lord has brought you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and your fathers, and has given it to you, you shall set apart for the Lord every first issue of the womb, every male firstling that your cattle drop shall be the Lord's. But every firstling ass you shall redeem with a sheep. If you do not redeem it, you must break its neck, and you must redeem every firstborn male among your children. And when in time to come your son asks you, saying, "What does this mean?" you shall say to him, "It was with a mighty hand that the Lord brought us out of Egypt, the house of bondage."
Great. Now, if you could read also, flip to Numbers, chapter 18, verse 15 to 16. Numbers 18. Verse 15 to 16.
Guy, what is Numbers?
Vaikra.
18. The first issue of the womb of every being, man or beast, that is offered to the Lord shall be yours, but you shall have the firstborn of man redeemed, and you shall also have the firstling of unclean animals redeemed.
Right.
Take as the redemption price from the age of 1 month.
Yeah. Okay. So the commandment is that the firstborn male of every mother, human and animal, belongs to God. Okay, what we read in Exodus. Okay, you have to give the firstborn living being, human or animal, of every mother to God. Okay, kosher animals are given as a special sacrifice. Unkosher animals are redeemed with a kosher animal of the appropriate value. Okay, so basically, the kosher animal is sacrificed instead of the unkosher animal. Again, the firstborn of the mother. And firstborn humans, males, are to be also redeemed, because you can't sacrifice them. Okay, so you're commanded, it's not even an option. That if you want this son, you can redeem him. Says, no, you have to redeem him, because you can't sacrifice him. And they're redeemed for cash. Okay, so the child, the firstborn son, is brought to the priest, who symbolically releases the baby from this dedication to God or consecration to God in exchange for 5 shekels of silver. Okay, and the money was was used to sustain the temple, and the parents returned home with their newborn son. Okay, so now, when you have these rules about giving something to God, or dedicating something to God, if we read the Iftach Vow again, the context becomes more contextual. Yifftah promises to give whatever or whomever comes out of his house, forget the whatever, whomever comes out of his house to greet him to God. I will sacrifice him, I will offer him as that person as a burnt offering to God. Okay? But everyone understood that, look, if it happened, let's assume that it was a whatever. Let's assume that a donkey, an unkosher animal, came out to greet him. Everyone understands, including you and me, that Iftach cannot offer a donkey as a sacrifice, as a burnt offering to God, because a donkey is not kosher. Okay? So, if you vow to sacrifice, to give a donkey to God, it's common knowledge that the donkey will not be slaughtered at the altar and burnt. Instead, the donkey would be given to God in a different way. Okay, with this redemption and who knows what. Likewise, when a human being came out, anyone would understand the context. Okay, the humans also, just like donkeys, humans are not sacrificed at the altars. Humans are not kosher, quote-unquote, animals. Okay, so that person is not going to be slaughtered like a cow or a sheep, but instead, just like with the donkey, it will be offered to God in a different way. Okay? So the question is, so now the question, since we've eliminated the possibility that you'd sacrifice a human being at the altar, just like we understand that you won't sacrifice a donkey at the altar, the question is what it means now. Okay, what's this other way that you can? What does Iftach mean to do with this person who comes out to greet him? So, look, according to Mosaic law, according to the law that Moses gave to the to Jews in the Torah, like I said, only priests can offer burnt offerings to God. Okay, in fact, in the book of Samuel, we'll see King Saul doing it himself and catches heck for it. So, when some Joe Schmo, me or you, offered a calf as a burnt offering to God, he delivered the calf to the temple, and the priest slaughtered it and burnt it on the altar. Okay? But what if you cannot travel all the way to wherever the temple was at the time, and you still wanted to offer a sacrifice? Or what if you offered something that cannot travel? Like if you offer a field, or if you offer a house to God as a sacrifice. Okay? So what they did was they picked a calf, or a field, or a house. A priest came and estimated its cash value, and you gave the cash to the temple. Maybe through a messenger, maybe through the local priest, doesn't matter. Okay, and I'm not sure what happened then. I don't know if the priest at the temple simply added the cash to the temple treasury, or whether he converted that cash back into some sort of kosher animal, at the market, and then slaughtered and burned it. So, but it doesn't matter for our purposes. But look, if you read Leviticus 27, this is again, you don't have to finish. You can just get the gist of it, of this evaluation system. Okay, there's 27. Okay, Leviticus. So Leviticus is this book with all these ritual laws, how to do this and this and this, with very exact instructions. And what you see there, all of Leviticus outlines a system of evaluation of the gift that you offer, and the assessed amount of money for the gift. Okay, so instead of the actual creature or thing, let's say a field, that you promised as an offering to God, there's this system of barter, a system of exchange. Okay, so verses 2 through 8 explain the cash value of a human gift to God. Okay, so if you vow to give your slave or your daughter or your son to God, this is the system of this is how much value each category of human being is worth. Then verses 9 through 15 discuss animal gifts to God. Again, what's the value of a donkey, value of a cow, etc. And then verses 14 to 25 discuss real estate gifts to God. How much is your field? How the assessment is going to be assessed for a field, of which size, etc., and how much for a house. And later on, as you continue in chapter 27, the chapter describes other kinds of gifts to God. Okay, the gift of, it's called in Hebrew cherem, in English it's prescription, which will become relevant to us later on with Saul. Gifts designated as tithes, both of which have different rules than burnt offerings. So simple enough. You dedicate a gift to God. The priests translate it to money, and you give that money. Okay, so it sounds okay. The system is pretty understandable to us. But then the question is, what happens to that original gift? Okay, so let's say I promised God a donkey, okay, which then is redeemed by some kosher animal. Okay, so or if I offered a field and it's replaced by some cash value that I paid out of my pocket to the temple. Okay, so what happens now to that field? What happens to the donkey? Okay. And it turns out that that those sacrificial laws in Leviticus covered it. Okay, they explain again. They're very exact. What happens? Okay, just one example is verse 9 and 10 in Leviticus 27. Okay, and it explains this calf that you sacrificed and exchanged to some sort of money gift. That calf is holy. You cannot use it for its milk, its meat, its hide, its manure, its muscle, or its breeding. Okay, that is not your cow. Okay, that cow is still alive. Okay, walking and eating and pooping in your yard. But it is not yours to use, it is God's. It is consecrated to God. Okay? Thus, you must feed that cow and keep it alive, but never harvest it for its hide, its milk, its meat, its labor, or its offspring. And the same goes for the field. Okay? You offered a field. Obviously, you can't bring the field to the altar. You had this cash exchange for it. Okay? But you cannot use the field. The field is not yours. It is God's. And so I hope you can see what a huge sacrifice it was. Okay? These were huge sacrifices because you're sacrificing the value of the gifted animal or the gifted land plus the value of having it just stand there unused after this. Okay? So again, this is the context that you and I don't know about because nobody sacrificed anything at the altar for 2,000 years. It doesn't mean anything to us. Okay? But if you now skip back to Yiftach's daughter, now you can understand why, like Tom said, why she goes off to the mountains to mourn her virginity. Okay? If she were offered really as a human sacrifice, we'd expect her to mourn her young life. Okay? The fact that she's mourning her virginity, or as you said, David, the fact that she's not going to have children, indicating that what she's losing by Iftach's vow is not her life, but her ability to marry and procreate. Okay? Iftach cannot give her to a groom, he cannot collect the bride price for her, and she cannot procreate. She can't have children. Okay? And this is why I gave you that whole soliloquy about women and marriage and children in the ancient or in pre-modern society. Okay? Because women in the Bible are not modern liberated women with goals and pursuits outside the family. You know, career goals or academic or artistic pursuits. Okay? We know that childless women in the Bible were women who were tortured. Okay? They experienced unbearable shame and a crisis of meaning every day of their lives. Again, just think of, remember when we talked about Hagar and Sarah, how Hagar, the slave woman, looked down on Sarah, her mistress, because Sarah was barren and Hagar was not. Or think of Rachel, of her anguish at seeing her fertile sister producing sons left and right, and she is the barren wife. Or, you know, Samson's mother, Samuel's mother. Again, they're the image of the tortured soul in the Bible. Okay? So this is partly, but only partly, because they lived in societies that were different from our societies. Okay? Societies that didn't have nationalism to produce national welfare systems and safety nets. But also because they lived in families that were different from our families. Okay? And consider that being a barren wife in a polygamous family is very different and much, much, much worse than being barren in a monogamous society, monogamous family. Okay, so this looks at. Okay, we should finish this, but nothing could give a woman a sense of value and purpose and respectability and security like children. This is why when we get to Samuel, Samuel's father, Elkanah, tells his barren wife, but honey, I'm better for you than 10 sons. Why are you so gloomy? Okay, but commentators always look at this scene as comical. Yeah, because women in the Bible did not draw meaning and value in their lives from the love of a good man. Look, Rachel is a great example. She had a husband who adored her. You know, it's one of the most inspiring love stories in Western history. But it didn't cut it. She was going crazy. Okay, so her husband's love was fine, but she had no use for it without a son. She said that she'd rather die if she didn't get a son. Okay, so it's one of these things that we as modern people have to have it explained to us. Okay, why is Iftach's daughter so distraught if she's not being killed, but only consecrated to God? Because look, she'll be clothed and fed and sheltered for life. You know, she can spend her days painting or writing the great American novel, or just reading or watching TV all day. Okay? But biblical audiences didn't need, you know, men and women both, didn't need to explain to them why this kind of life was a tragedy. Okay? They just understood intuitively that she will spend her entire life without purpose, not to mention without love, without a husband, without fulfillment, without respect from her neighbors, and without material security and physical security. Okay? She will never have a family of her own. She will also always be dependent on the charity of on the donations of others. She'll never have a husband to provide for her and protect her, and she won't have sons to care for her and provide for her and protect her in old age. Okay. So if you go back to verse 39, when she comes back at the end of 2 months, okay, it says, I want to go back to what Tal said earlier about her being a virgin. Okay. So again, so it says her father did to her as he promised, and she knew no man. Okay. So if you think that she was slaughtered on the altar, then you understand the statement as she died a virgin. Okay. And again, think of, if you were reading this as a story about a girl who was killed by her father, what's the logic here? I mean, is being murdered by your father as a virgin more tragic than being murdered by your father as a married woman? Okay, this bit of data is odd if you think that he murdered her or killed her at the altar, sacrificed her at the altar. However, if you believe this alternate explanation that we went through here of no human sacrifice, if you believe that she was given to God but not sacrificed at the altar, then you read this verse as Tal suggested, as she remained a virgin forevermore. Okay, she never married, she never had children. And now this sentence makes sense because it clarifies the consequences of the vow. If you understand the vow as not being human sacrifice. Okay, so it's one of these things where the tragic element of this story is hidden from us because women have a different social role and a different identity in our society. Okay, so we, men and women in our society, we see women differently, and women see themselves differently. Okay, but ancient audiences would get that, would get the tragedy intuitively because they were on the same page with the biblical author. Okay, the author and the audience, the original audience, had the same sensibilities about women and marriage and children. And they'd see that Iftach went to war to save his daughter from a cruel fate of a solitary life. To win this war, he makes this promise to God, and his success in the war, by this cruel twist of fate, condemns the daughter to a solitary life. Okay, so again, so it's really this Greek tragedy that is kind of lost on us because we just live in a very different society, and we have to have it explained to us educationally what life and marriage, etc., meant to fathers and to families, to fathers and to daughters and to mothers, etc. So the last question, the last question is, why did she come out of the house? Okay, so look, let's start this way. What do you think Iftach imagined that he was vowing when he made his vow? Okay, because we know from his wailing and from his surprise that he did not mean for his daughter to come out to greet him. Okay, that was a surprise to him. Okay, so who did he expect? Again, assuming that we can put aside this silly idea that he expected a cow or a dog. So if it wasn't his daughter, then who did he expect to come out?
Have to be his wife or a servant, but
Which do you think?
well, I guess there are redemptions for servants.
Well, for anyone, because look, one of those rules was dedicating. You could dedicate your son too, and redeem him, or your daughter, or your wife. But so, look, when you give a person, when you dedicate a person to God, as you read in Leviticus, there, you're promising to give the assessed cash equivalent of that person, according to that system you just read in Leviticus. But also, you're now committed to feeding and housing and clothing this person to not work for you. Okay, so. Again, so it's a big sacrifice. You're donating a lot of money to the temple now, but you're also paying for the rest of your life for this person that you just liberated from labor, from servitude, from slavery. You have to now feed him and clothe him and shelter him for the rest of your life. Okay, so when Iftach made this vow, it was a big. It was a lavish and public display of commitment to God. Okay, I'm vowing to give a lot of money. Again, not just in the cash equivalent of this person, but also I will, for the rest of my life, I'll pay a lot of money continuously to keep this man or woman fed and clothed and sheltered. It's kind of like if you think of today, if a man in public says, I'm going to donate $1 million to the synagogue. Okay, or think of how in colonial America, people would announce, usually on their deathbed, that I will emancipate this or that slave, or this many number of slaves, as a to signal their Christian and humanitarian virtue. Okay, so that's what Iftach would be doing here. Okay, displaying his kind of how much he's willing to give to God, to take out of his pocket and offer to God in thanks for this. But consider that it's also a very lucrative prize for the person who is being dedicated to God. Okay, because this person in Yiftach's household will never have to work another day in his life. Free room and board for the rest of his life. Okay, so you can imagine that when Yiftach made this vow, he expected, it was a public vow, everybody heard. He expected that on his return, the workers and the servants and the slaves in the household would race each other and kind of knock each other down, because each one would be trying to get to the door first to win this great prize, to be liberated from whatever terms of dependence he had. Again, if it was a slave or a servant or a worker. Free room and board for the rest of your life in the house of the judge. Okay. Again, think of Thomas Jefferson announcing publicly that he will emancipate the first person, the first slave that he will meet tomorrow. Okay, you know that all the slaves would be up at dawn trying to find an opportunity to have Jefferson meet them. Okay, so this certainly explains why Iftach was surprised to see his daughter rushing out. He expected the servants and the slaves, etc., to be racing out towards him. Okay, but for us, it raises this big question of why did this twist of fate happen? Why did the daughter come out of the house towards her father instead of these slaves and servants that the vow was meant for? Okay. So, why would she do this?
Did she
Look.
misunderstand the very public vow?
So look, it was very public. Um, and we know it was public because he expected. Well, A, we read that it was public, and B, he expected the servants to come and greet him, somebody to come and greet him, because they knew that there was a vow. So either somehow the daughter didn't know about the vow, or she knew and wanted to be dedicated to God, or she misunderstood.
Could it be like in Ruth's story where she wanted to stay because she was his only kid, and if she would be married, she'd be off to another family. This way, she stays home,
Right.
and she can stay with her father and take care of him or whatever. Just be of company to him as he gets older.
Yeah. So look, it could. So look, the text does not tell us. Okay, so we're completely speculating, but so we're in the dark. However, in chapter 11, 35. Where is it? No, sorry, 36. Okay, when he says, I've already opened my mouth to God and I can't take it back, her response suggests, the option that we had, that maybe she didn't know about it, or maybe she didn't understand it, is taken off the table. Because she seems to it seems to indicate in verse 36, says, you opened your mouth to God, do to me as you promised. Okay? So it suggests that she knew about the vow and she understood what it meant for her. Okay? Which leaves the third option, that she wanted this. She wanted to be dedicated to God. Okay? And so, as you said, maybe she didn't want to grow up. Okay, maybe she wanted to stay at home and not assume the role of a grown woman, be married off, again at the age of however old she was, let's say 15. What else? What other? Again, we don't know, but we're just kind of trying to understand. If we know, which I think we do, that she knew about the vow and understood it, why would she choose to go out the door in front of the slaves and servants who we think, like, we can understand why a slave would do it, but why would she do it? So that's one option, that she didn't want to grow up.
I don't think she didn't want to grow up. I think she wanted to stay home to help because she was the only one that he had.
Oh,
he had no other kids.
Okay, so you mean not that...
I thought it was like Ruth.
Okay, so out of dedication to him.
It was selfless and not selfish.
I see. Okay, so those are both two separate options. One, that she wanted to stay with her father forever rather than becoming an adult woman with adult duties, or that she was willing to sacrifice her own adult, the benefits that come with adulthood, out of care and devotion to her father. Okay. What else could it be? And again, all of these are possible or probable. We can't know. Look, one option is that she just didn't consider she wanted to perform the normal feminine performance of greeting men when they come back from battle with dances and song, etc., and she didn't consider the price. Okay, because teenagers
show us how young she is.
Exactly, because teenagers don't teenagers do stupid things. Okay, they don't connect the danger to the, or they walk at the edge of cliffs and do all sorts of crazy things,
That
dangerous things.
that makes more sense considering that she wept her virginity later. Makes more sense that she didn't see the consequences of her actions and then
Yeah, or maybe she understood, but thought that maybe her father, the judge, could let her off the hook. Who knows? Maybe she felt, remember, she grew up in his household. She probably absorbed the bitterness towards the people of Gilad, the families of her tribe, and maybe she didn't want to marry into them. Maybe she was even more anti-Giladite than he was, more resentful. There's an argument that she was actually shrewd. That there's an economic reasoning here. Can you?
That he's going to be like the judge, so he's going to have the best house. He's going to have the most perks. So if she gets married out, it's only going to be a downgrade.
Right, and if she doesn't get married,
then she gets to stay with the judge who's got the most perks.
And after he dies,
she'll inherit.
she's the only.
she will inherit because she's the only one.
Yeah.
Okay, so according to Mosaic law, women can inherit if there's no male heir. Okay, so again, it could be. So she could be super shrewd. She could be selfish. She could be devoted, self-sacrificial. She could just be unthinking. So, and again, the text does not tell us, so we're completely in the dark. But as we and I'm sure there are many other kind of possibilities as we try to get into her mind. But as you do this, as you try to speculate about her motivations, it is important, as Tal suggested. It's important to remember that you shouldn't. That sometimes teenagers do things because of some sort of rational calculations, but often we have to remind ourselves not to try to find too much rationality in the actions of teenagers, because teenagers do foolish and thoughtless things because they're foolish and thoughtful by nature. And so maybe as a young teenager, she just didn't understand the long-term consequences of celibacy and childlessness as the older people in the tribe, and older people after, the people who remembered her in this national holiday, that they came to understand. And maybe her life turned out tragically, and that's what people are commemorating. How does that sound?
Definitely sets up an interesting choice between safety, security without children versus life with children.
Yeah. And look, again, I didn't consider what Tal said about the devotion, giving up the role of an adult woman out of devotion to the father. But look, and I'm assuming simply that I was more attuned to the being fearful of adulthood, simply because it's a feature of young people in our society, and so that's where my mind went to. But I think your version is probably more sensible for that society. But I guess I don't know. It's just look. It's. I told you last week, David, that the book of Judges has this trajectory that many commentators understand it as a downward trajectory in terms of the sinfulness of the people and the quality of the judges. And I don't know which came first, this understanding of Yifftah, which then informed this understanding of the book as a downward spiral, morally speaking, or that first came this downward spiral from Joshua towards David, and then why David kind of came about. And because of that, a very certain understanding of Iftach's vow came about. That people were kind of pushed to understand his vow as a murderous vow in order to fit a pattern that they have in their minds for the book of Judges. But in any case, and that's what we're going to do next week with Samson, because Samson has a reputation of being the worst judge, the worst Jewish leader in, maybe that's too much, but actually probably not too much. But in any case, in the Bible, certainly in the book of Judges. And so what I want to do next week is to investigate that, because the image that Samson has among the commentators over the past 2,000 years plus is very different from the attitude that emerges from the author. Okay? The author seems to approve of him, whereas the commentators, many generations, disapprove of him wholeheartedly. Okay? And so something is, either the author is delivering a message, he seems to approve of him, but actually he's very critical of him under the surface, or we're not understanding something. So, in the same way that I think we're misunderstanding about Iftach here. Okay, so we'll do that next week. Okay.
So as far as Yifftah, I can't think of one. Is there any other account of an Israelite making a vow to the biblical God that I'm going to do something if I win this battle, and that being a sacrifice? I can't think of a parallel. This seems like a very unique.
I don't want to say. I can't think of one, because usually the sacrifice comes at the beginning. I can't think of one, but that doesn't mean anything. I'll look it up. I'll tell you next week. But you're right. Usually look, what I can think of is Jacob, where Jacob, remember, God reveals himself to him, I think, at the scene with the ladder. And he makes Jacob a promise, and then Jacob says, if you do this for me, if you get me to Haran safe and sound, and if you get me back to Canaan safe and sound, and feed me and clothe me, then I will build you a temple and give you a tenth of everything I have, etc.
That makes more sense, because he's sacrificing, like he's promising something in his power. He's not sacrificing something else or somebody else or anything like that.
Yeah. But yes, let me think of it.
The other troubling part is when he talks about the vow, he says, I will offer it up as a burnt offering, that Olah. I can't think of another place where Olah is ever used for anything other than an animal being burnt.
Right. Yeah. No. So it's a look. If it just had the words, I will give to God.
Right.
I will consecrate to God whatever or whoever comes out of my house, we wouldn't even have this debate. Okay? It's because it's a burnt offering, which we know is an animal that is slaughtered on the altar and burnt, that the whole idea of if we didn't have that word, nothing here would suggest human sacrifice, killing of the daughter. Yes, that's the. Like I said, the reason why there's a strong argument in favor of human sacrifice is because of this language in the vow, and then what follows. That she says about the vow and she cries and everything else. So it's definitely problematic, but I think
unique. The vow itself seems unique. The wording here seems unique.
So again, I don't want to say that the vow is unique simply because I don't know.
I just Googled it,
Uh-huh.
And the only other that comes up is מישה מלך מואב מקריב את בנו בכורו כדי לנצח בקרב, which I don't know how to say it in English.
Yeah.
But the
So,
king of Moab,
the king of Moab sacrifices his son in order to win a battle. Okay. Now look, Mesha is if it's the same Mesha from Ktovet Mesha, from the Mesha steel, is from well after David. Okay, but again, there are different debates about when these books were written. So it might be. So look, certainly he's not a Jewish character, not an Israelite. But yeah, so look, if that's the case, then it means that there's no other.
those are the other only two
Va-
characters.
Wait, characters who vowed to sacrifice a person or vowed.
I asked which characters vowed to
Yeah.
sacrifice a person in order to win a battle.
Yeah, no.
Very
What David is asking is there another sacrifice to win a battle in which you're vowing to God, if I win the battle, then I will give you something, as opposed to, because usually what
That's
happens.
what I asked. That's what I asked. But the
Oh,
only
okay.
thing I got out of it was Iftach and Moab
I see.
king.
Yeah.
Moab.
Yeah. So look. So usually, the sacrifice comes first, before the battle. Okay? I'm sacrificing in order to get something in battle, whereas I will give God something after God gives me. The situation we saw with Jacob, or now here with Iftach, is definitely more rare. Again, I don't know how singular it is, but yeah, but going back to your point about the burnt offering, in this whole formulation, it turns out that the thing that introduces this whole controversy is that it's this kind of offering rather than the other kinds of offering that don't explicitly involve burning at the stake. But again, given what we know about Pidyon, about the system of redeeming sacrificed animals with cash value, again, it's not. The simplest solution would be to change the terminology here, but I can see a way in which, given that he is promising something that is clearly not kosher, that no priest would burn at the altar, and that involves murder. Again, we're assuming, given his surprise to see his daughter there, he was promising to sacrifice some other person, something that is clearly murder throughout the Bible. Okay. So I think the most logical solution to this problem, this terminology problem, is that in the context that they had, he was offering a burnt offering with the understanding of some sort of redemption, and that the sacrificed person would become holy and have room and board for the rest of his life. Okay. All right.
No, it was very interesting. I had not considered that.
It's so there's a book by this scholar named Pamela Tamarkin, and she's the first one where the book is called Reading the Lines, and that's the first place I read this interpretation. But then I read about it in other commentators as well. But yeah, it's interesting. And again, look, this story is interesting in itself, but I want you to remember it as for next week when we talk about Samson, because when you look at the book of Judges, its role is very specific if it is a story about the downward spiral of the Israelites between Joshua and Samuel. Okay. But if it's so we understand Jewish history, Israelite history, and the rise of King Saul and King David, and the rise of the monarchy, in a very certain way, if the period after Joshua, if the period after Joshua is this steep and consistent decline and moral debasement and and leaders who grow from good to okay to bad to terrible, then it explains what happens in the book of Samuel and the rise of the monarchy in a certain way. If, however, that story, this narrative, is a misunderstanding of the book of Judges, then that explains the coming of the monarchy in a very different way. Okay, so if instead of this kind of narrative arc for the book of Judges, what you actually have is this kind of arc, where it's not that Yifftah is terrible and Samson is abominable, but rather that Iftach is good or fine, and Samson is awesome, then it explains the coming of the monarchy in very different terms, which again we'll talk next week. Okay, but keep this in mind for that, because the question of this human sacrifice is very important for our understanding of Yifftah, but our understanding of Yifftah as a positive figure or as a terrible figure is very important for assessing the trajectory of the book of Judges as a whole. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And see you next week. Good night, Tom.
Okay.
See ya.
Take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.